When facts collide with identity. Why truth feels like an attack, what I got wrong, and where this journey goes next. Welcome to An Overthinker's Almanac. This is the finale of my 5-part series, From Bricks to Bridges, the story of how my biggest failure during COVID taught me why facts fail and why philosophy and psychology matter as much as science if we want to create real change. This whole journey has been my attempt to make sense of the biggest mistake in my life, believing I could reason people into changing their minds. Over the last few episodes, we've explored that when science fails to make an impact, we need to turn to the tools of philosophy and psychology. We've covered how effective influence thrives on convenience, simplicity, and repetition, making fact-checking the internet about as effective as yelling into a hurricane. This explains how COVID was far more than a hotbed for spreading a virus. It was a textbook growth environment for conspiracies and misinformation. Today, in true overthinker style, we go even deeper. We're no longer talking about information, we're now talking about identity. What happens when new facts don't just conflict with someone's knowledge, but with who they believe themselves to be? When sharing facts feels like an attack on belonging. This episode was the hardest because it's also the most personal. I'll share how these identity defenses played out in my family, what biases I missed in myself, and what I've learned since. And as we wrap up, I'll preview where my writing goes from here, taking these lessons and applying them not just to sustainability or COVID, but the bigger question of how we understand each other, ourselves, in a messy, complicated world. The ultimate mental fortress defense mechanism. Last time, we discussed how fiercely we'll defend information bricks in our mental fortress, even when we're incorrect. Being told you're wrong about facts stings, triggering the backfire effect. But what happens when those facts are tangled up with identity, or worse, tribal allegiance? That's when the heavy artillery comes out. We're wired for this. With a mental toolkit dating back to the Serengeti, humans learned early that survival depends on belonging to the group. Rejecting your tribe didn't just result in being lonely. It was less of a mental risk and directly connected to your actual survival. Disagreement risked being shunned, left to fend for oneself, and very likely dead. That vital instinct from thousands of years ago is still hardwired into our brains. So when building our mental palaces, information bricks get mortared right next to our identity, and the two become indistinguishable. Attacks on information feel identical to attacks on the self. If the tribe has already adopted a shared set of truths, then defending those bricks becomes a matter of loyalty. Letting them crumble would destabilize not just what you know, but who you are, risking literally getting thrown to the wolves. That was the wall I was up against with my family during COVID. While I presented opposing facts, they heard an attack on their identity, tribe, and belonging. My expectations were impossible. I was trying to separate information from identity at the exact moment their tribe was loading the cannons to repel invaders. And here's the fact I wish someone would have told me back in 2020. When identity is involved, conflicting facts don't walk people out of their fortress. You don't go outside when someone is chucking rocks at your house. You go deeper inside, away from the windows, and plan your counteroffensive. Dan Ariely nails describing this phenomenon in his book Misbelief, which I highly recommend. He explores why people reject science when it threatens their identity, and shares his surreal experience of being cast as part of the Gates-Fauci cabal. Instead of dismissing it, he tried to talk with the people spreading conspiracies about him. In amazing acts of humility and curiosity, Ariely describes his attempt to understand and engage his accusers in a way most of us could never manage in the heat of conflict. So how far will people go to defend beliefs tied to identity? To answer that, let's make things a little more interesting, leaving pandemics momentarily. Let's talk aliens and UFOs. How far will we go to protect ourselves? So, how far would you go to protect your tribe and identity? Is there any amount of information that would make you stop and ask, what if I've been wrong this whole time? That's a terrifying thought. Our bodies almost reject conflicting information like a bad transplant. Even if it comes from a reliable source, the reflex is attack, dismiss, discredit. The deeper that belief is tied to identity, the stronger the defense. Ariely points this out in Misbelief. When conspiracy bricks are deeply mortared into someone's worldview, rescue missions become nearly impossible. That even goes for rejecting all terrestrial retrieval and putting all your chips on saviors from outer space. Back in the 1950s, psychologist Leon Festinger and his colleagues decided to infiltrate a doomsday cult. The Seekers, or the Brotherhood of the Seven Rays, led by Dorothy Martin under the pseudonym Mariana Keech, claimed aliens called the Guardians had warned Martin that Earth would be destroyed in a massive flood on December 21st, 1954. Her followers believed aliens would save them on UFOs if they stuck with her. This was the perfect cult research project because the date in question was effectively within the same grant cycle. Festinger's team wanted to see what happened when a firmly held belief ran straight into unequivocal disinformation. Spoiler alert, the world didn't end in 1954. There was no UFO, no flood, and December 22nd arrived just as usual in the Midwest. So you'd think the cult members would wake up and say, hey, the spaceship didn't come and we're all still here. Well, I guess we were wrong. Oops. Right? Nope. Unexpectedly, researchers found that instead of abandoning Martin's past prophecies, many cult members doubled down. The fact that the planet wasn't destroyed was proof that their beliefs worked. Sounds familiar, right? This conflicting information is proof that I was right. The ones who had sacrificed the most, like those who had sold homes, quit jobs, effectively uniting their entire identity with the group, were the most likely to commit even further. They became even more vocal evangelists, recruiting others as living validation of their beliefs. In what seemed like a moment that should have been a, what the hell am I doing with my life? This whole thing was a sham. Humans chose to recommit their faith rather than admit defeat. While an extreme example, Festinger's work highlights how strong our mental fortress defense mechanisms are, and why my direct frontal attacks were absolutely useless. If a non-existent apocalypse won't change minds, my attempt at citing some obscure virology journals didn't stand a chance. But things get even darker when we move beyond our personal identity and the perceived attacks against our tribe. Once facts and belonging are fused, the fortress walls shift from protecting me to protecting us, and those implications become much scarier. The darkest aspect of tribe over self. This is where Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who resisted the Nazis, offers chilling insight. He observed how easily groupthink can lead people to accept and even participate in atrocities. The pattern is simple and terrifying. First, we crave acceptance from our group. Then, we outsource our thinking to its loudest voices. Finally, we hand over responsibility for our actions, convinced that if everyone's doing it, it must be right. Availability bias shifts from information to actions. Once we've wandered far enough down this seemingly logical path, our minds allow something even more nefarious. Responsibility is spread across the entire group, and personal guilt evaporates. We walk away convinced we were justified, or never even notice that there's anything to feel guilty about. Bonhoeffer's example is extreme, but the psychology is universal. Whether it's a cult, political party, or COVID conspiracies, our wiring makes it frighteningly easy to place tribe over self and surrender our judgment, blinding and even absolving ourselves from any wrongdoing. That's why I write about this stuff and what overthinking is about. It's not to wallow in how much people suck, but to remind myself and maybe you how much vigilance and energy are required to overcome the natural tendencies of our mind. While I've spent most of this series dissecting other people's defenses, I was also blind to my biases in approaching the situation. So let's get meta, analyzing my mistakes in a series about my biggest mistake. I was wrong too. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but not notice the log that is in your own eye? Matthew chapter 7, verse 3. No evaluation of 2020 would be complete or fair without turning the lens on myself. It's easy to pick apart other people's defenses, but I demonstrated plenty of my own biases. Here's a few of the biggies. Number 1, no, I'm not the only one who's objective. My first mistake was assuming there's such a thing as an objective set of facts. In reality, we all see the world from behind our own fortress walls. Every brick of our past experience, trusted sources, and cultural ties colors how we evaluate new information. What felt obvious to me as a scientist wasn't obvious at all to my family. Even with a shared upbringing, our fortresses had drifted into very different structures. My Mediterranean architecture made things look quite differently than their mid-century craftsmen. To assume everyone saw the same reality was to kid myself. Psychologists call this naive realism, believing that everyone sees the world as you do, and when they don't, you're the only one seeing things correctly. Yep, reality doesn't work like that. 2, overvaluing my expertise. My second mistake was overvaluing my credentials. For people already aligned with me, my PhD and professional background were assets, enhancing the credibility of my trusted bricks to reinforce their palaces. But for others, those same credentials made me the enemy, just another nerd with letters after his name trying to impose the system's truth on them. I thought my resume was a golden ticket. Instead, it painted a target on my back. 3, assuming my motives were obvious. I also believed my good intentions were self-evident. I wasn't cashing in on the pandemic, I never got an invitation to the Illuminati mixer, and I still don't have a reserved seat on Bill Gates' spaceship. Aside from owning some Clorox stock, which, yes, I should have sold in 2020, I had nothing to gain. We know what's in our hearts, but to others, it's all about what they perceive. All we have to evaluate each other on is our actions. While I felt my motives were virtuous, my actions appeared to be an attack on my family's identity and tribe. 4, misreading the medium. Another blind spot was the medium itself. Social media used to be a place for birthdays, vacation photos, and food pics. In 2020, vacations were canceled, restaurants were closed, and it had become a fire hose of fear and negativity. My attempts to inject reality weren't experienced as helpful. I became an interruption. I was an interloper on the one place people still went for connection and escape. I was a wet blanket on the virtual party. 5, setting the wrong success metrics. Finally, I set myself up for failure with impossible goals. My metric for success was convincing my relatives. That was never in my control. When they retreated further into their mental fortress, I internalized it as my failure. It's taken years and a lot of stoic reflection to reset those metrics. I still want to help others, but my North Star has shifted. My focus is now internal, to create work I'm proud of that feels true to me and brings me joy in the process. If it helps others, amazing. If not, it still helps me. And that's the only part I can control. Wrapping up from bricks to bridges. So, what did I really learn from this? First, you have to meet people where they are. It's tempting to target the loudest opposition, and emotions often pull us in that direction with a desire to reach through the screen and shake someone. But it's far more rewarding and frankly more fun and emotionally stable to help those open to learning expand their horizons. That means leaning on analogies, humor, and connection to make the bricks stickier. It's why I compare plastics to peeing in the pool and advanced recycling to an Iron Chef mystery basket. Relatable, memorable, a little irreverent, that's what we do here at Overthinker. Second, when we do engage those who disagree, we can't come in with a frontal assault of facts. We need to channel our inner Socrates, asking questions, remaining curious, and being the kind of guest that gets invited to someone's mental fortress instead of banging out fact after fact as a battering ram. Consistency matters, and once you go to the emotional dark side, you're a Sith for life. Intent only counts if it's experienced as such. Commit to approaching these challenging conversations with humility, compassion, and openness to hearing the other side. Third, and maybe the most important, is setting the proper goalposts. I can't control whether my writing goes viral or whether my family, colleagues, or readers change their worldview. All I can control is the work itself. Showing up, creating something I'm proud of, and letting that be enough. That's stoicism in action, with success measured not by outcomes, but alignment with my values. This is why philosophy and psychology matter so much to me, and why, despite retaining my lab coat and scientific credentials, they'll be a recurring thread here on Substack. Facts are interesting, but people are fascinating. My aim isn't to hand out more bricks to people who already agree with me. It's building bridges, to try to reach those who disagree, understand the origins of that disagreement, and ask better questions that might spark real reflection. Maybe I'll even share some tactics that help you survive your next family reunion. That's why my sustainability series wasn't just about plastic. It was about discourse itself, shifting the conversation, finding common ground, and practicing the discipline of staying in the arena without hardening the battle lines. Was I effective? Honestly, no. Sometimes my passion for snarkiness and my latent desire to unleash my inner Statler and Waldorf get in the way. But that's the point. I'm still learning, experimenting, and trying to grow. By sharing it in public, hopefully I'll build enough humility for others to join me on this journey. So, as I pivot into new series like my upcoming dive into the philosophy lessons of Super Mario Bros., know that the through line is the same. Exploring something I find interesting, building bridges, asking better questions, and exploring how psychology and philosophy can help us understand both others and ourselves. This isn't the end of the ride. It's just the start of a bigger one. Thanks for listening and for walking with me. I appreciate you sticking with me through this transition series. If you've listened this far, you're officially part of the Overthinker crowd, and I'm grateful to have you along. I'm excited to keep exploring philosophy, psychology, sustainability, and whatever else pops up on my mental whiteboard next. Here's to overthinking the world together, one brick, one bridge, and one big question at a time. Cheers.